In the race for the Republican presidential nomination, it seems like there's already been enough storylines, slip-ups, debates, and lead changes for a full election season. That's why it's hard to believe no one has even cast a vote yet, and we're still about 2 months away from the first caucuses. And now there is a logjam at the top of the polls yet again. A new poll of likely GOP caucus voters in Iowa shows Herman Cain in the lead, just barely though ahead of Ron Paul and Mitt Romney, and also Newt Gingrich in the mix as well. For more this morning, we're joined from Washington by Scott Conroy. He's a national political reporter for RealClearPolitics and a CBS News contributor. Scott, good morning to you. Appreciate you being with us.
Great to be here.
Now, let's go through these front runners. We'll start with Herman Cain. He's had these sexual assault allegations. He's had a gaffe here and there. Are those problems starting to catch up with him in the polls?
I think we're seeing that they are starting to catch up with him a little bit. He actually has weathered the sexual harassment allegations probably better than most people would have expected by this point. But another one of Cain's problems is that he really has not shown a firm grasp of policy. And I think we saw that in the foreign policy debate, the CBS News debate on Saturday. And we saw it on Monday with his comments about Libya, where he seemed to be completely perplexed and really had no idea how to answer a very simple question. So I think that people are really going to wonder whether Herman Cain crosses that threshold for someone that you can imagine being president of the United States. And I think that's another one of his big challenges now.
Then you've also got Ron Paul that's in the mix now. He's also near the top of the list. Where did he come from? And are we talking about a candidate that could potentially win Iowa?
You know, Ron Paul never really seems to get the due that he deserves. I mean, he has been out there. He's been airing ads for a long time now in Iowa, more so than any other candidate, really. And he's been consistently in sort of the mid-teens to upper teens, which we're seeing in this most recent poll, which is pretty good in a crowded field. The question for him is whether he can break past his very, very fervent base to the next level. And he hasn't shown the ability to do that yet. But again, in a crowded field, the idea that Ron Paul could actually compete to win the Iowa caucuses is definitely not inconceivable.
Then you've got Newt Gingrich. A lot of experts had him out of the race, pretty much dead on arrival, his campaign over the summer. Now he's near the top of the polls.
Right, this is Newt's big moment now. I mean, it's Newt momentum, and everyone is talking about Gingrich at this point. As you said, he was written off for dead back in the spring when his entire campaign staff resigned en masse and his campaign seemed to be imploding. But Newt is someone who has done very, very well in the debates. And I think this cycle, more than what anyone expected, the debates have played a major role in this campaign. We've seen relatively little of the kind of retail politicking that almost always defines presidential campaigns. I think now finally the candidates are getting out there in Iowa and New Hampshire all the time, and they're really, hitting the ground hard. But we hadn't seen very much of that up until now. And Newt's performance in the debates has been very strong. I was talking to some of his aides today. They're feeling very great. They're feeling confident. They're holding off for a while on airing some of his first ads, which they intend to do soon, within the next few weeks. And he's going to continue to run a very kind of unconventional campaign. He's not going to have the standard 30-second ads that we're used to seeing with these candidates. It remains to be seen if he can stand up to some of the challenges over concerns about his personal life. He's been, a fixture in Washington for so long, and so it's a bit difficult for him to run as an outsider, having been in the Capitol for such a long period of time. But a lot of Republicans really like Newt Gingrich, and sort of the media and the conventional wisdom is finally acknowledging that.
Scott, with all of the people at the top of this poll now, you really have to ask. We mentioned this at the very top of the interview. We've had poll number changes on and off here for the last couple of weeks. What does this say about the Republican presidential field?
Well, it still says that they're looking for an alternative to Mitt Romney, and we knew from the very beginning of this campaign that the race would likely boil down to Mitt Romney and someone else, and that someone else still has not emerged yet. Romney is looking very strong. He's run a great campaign. He's also been very lucky. I mean, look, a lot of these guys that he thought were going to challenge him didn't get into the race at all, and he was now facing up against a bunch of competitors that may not be that strong in the end. Romney's problem is that he can't seem to break past that 25 to 30% threshold that he's going to need to break past if he's going to be the nominee. This is still a very competitive race in Iowa. He didn't plan to run in Iowa, really, but now it's looking so ripe for the picking for a candidate like him, since the conservative vote is so split, that he might be very, very tempted to get in there and make a hard push down the stretch. And of course, Romney is looking very tough in New Hampshire, and he's got a lot of cash in the bank and ready to use if this thing drags on for a long period of time.
Rick Perry still going at it. Tuesday, he emphasized his Washington outsider background, a lot of what we've seen Herman Cain do as well. Talked about Congress and making that a part-time job. Also talking about the president and cutting the president's salary. What does this do for Rick Perry? Is this going to work?
Well, this is sort of a move by Rick Perry to emphasize his outsider credentials. It's a pretty radical suggestion he's making about cutting those salaries, as you mentioned, and also he proposed changing an amendment to the Constitution that would make it so that federal judges were no longer lifetime appointees. I mean, those are really tough proposals to get through Congress, but they're obviously attention-getting. I think they will build his credentials as the outsider, the sort of straight-talking, shooting Texas politician that he has been for a long time. He's never worked in Washington before, like everyone else in the race. The problem for Perry, I think, is that maybe this seems a little bit like a desperate move for him to get back into the conversation. I mean, when he first got into the race, he was the next big thing. Everyone assumed that he was going to be the front runner, that he's the man to beat, but he's now mired in the single digits and some major gaffes that he's had, including that famous oops heard round the world that he had in a debate, is making things really tough for Rick Perry. But he's got money and he's got a great record on jobs in Texas, and so it's not out of the question that he'll get back into this thing.
All right, we'll see what happens. The Iowa caucus is held on January 3rd. Scott Conroy joining us from Washington this morning. Scott, good to see you and welcome aboard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.